My name is Tekano from South Africa. I am located in Johannesburg, which is the financial capital of South Africa. The province is Gauteng. We call our states provinces. It has the two big cities, which is Pretoria and Johannesburg. Pretoria is our diplomatic capital city, and I guess Johannesburg is our financial capital city, really. I arrived in South Africa from Bali. I haven't really lived in South Africa for the past 10 years. And I arrived literally 5 minutes before the president made the announcement of lockdown. So I pretty much arrived to a very different South Africa to, what I had left. Everybody's not wearing masks, and, they're sanitizing, and everybody's afraid of each other. And, there's this big invisible enemy that, we've been told is there and we have to fear. So that was on the 26th of March that the lockdown began. In the beginning, it was really hard to, know what was really going on. But the vibe from a lot of people was fear. People were like, "Whoa, I hope you won't be, I hope you weren't in China. You're in China. I hope you haven't brought anything back." There was the whole kind of fearmonger vibe being pushed towards people. And I still see that it's still very present, if not, grown even more. What I gather from it when I look around is that it's really an attack on, on the spirit, on the human spirit, on the soul. People are afraid of each other. People no longer need to be policed by, a police force, They do it themselves now. There's a separation that has been created. Every person is seen as an enemy. It's not like there's a bomb being dropped on us from the sky, creating like this massive explosion. It's more of an implosion now, through the whole separation of humans from one another. And people pretty much see each other as like cockroaches, really, disease carrying, kind of to be avoided, not to be touched, and ultimately, squashed. And that's like the implosion that I see that's happening. I think they had to play it very cautiously within South Africa because, we have a history of protesting. So we do have a history of kind of sticking up to the man, and voicing, our frustrations and our opinions, and a lot of times it's not necessarily done in the most peaceful way. And so they had to really, kind of tread carefully so that they don't spark a situation like that. In countries like South Africa, there's, extremely wealthy people, and there's also a lot of extremely poor people. Majority being a lot of poor people. In some places, it's almost impossible for there to be social distancing because a lot of people live in such close clustered areas, where it's overpopulated in some places. You have some people, 8 to 12 family members living, in a very small housing, And so they had to tread very lightly in that because there will just be an explosion. So it's happening, very slowly and in different ways to how it would work in say, like first world countries. Surprisingly, people have been, dosified. And what is really interesting, you do see the difference in the class. In the different social levels, when you go into areas more wealthy, you see a lot more of the restrictions, really strict on masks, people keeping their social distancing and all those, sanitize and all of that, right? But when you go into the ghettos, into poor areas, a lot of people are just like, to hell with this. We witness death in so many other ways. People get killed on a daily basis. People get robbed for this. People get robbed for that. So, why are we going to be afraid of this flu pandemic? And in those areas, it's less. You can see people walking around freely with no masks and people still trying to practice touch. I feel there's a war waged on touch. Touch is such a big part of our culture and of our medicine. It is our first medicine as human beings. If you have a headache, you touch yourself. If somebody's in pain, you extend your hand and you touch them where it's painful. If they have a headache, you touch them on their head, you touch them where it is, right? And so we've been told in a situation that requires medicine, a pandemic, not to touch. I remember when I was young, growing up, me and my male friends, we used to hold hands. Back then, there was no like any sort of negative sexual connotations related to that, as that being, gay or any other things. It was just that what you do with your friends, you hold hands and, you're in close proximity, you hug each other and, you touch each other. It's just a way of really showing that you love and you care for somebody and that you build that relationship. Through this, we're told not to touch each other, and the more people touch is the more that relationship is strengthened. The separation of humans by this whole social distancing is ultimately the taking away of our power. It's the taking away the power to unify. Unity is strength. I feel, though, is that when I go to, those type of areas, I feel it's easier to have an open conversation, a real conversation about what is really going on. That things aren't the way we've been told they are. The sanitizing thing, I really hate it. One, because we're being poisoned by it. You can go to a mall and need to go into 2-3 stores and you're having to sanitize every time. And so you're being constantly poisoned with methanol every time you're being sanitized. And we're in the middle of a flu pandemic and people are being poisoned with methanol, which is producing flu-like symptoms. In South Africa, we had alcohol ban for most of the lockdown. I see the other reasons for the ban on alcohol is because it contributes so much to our economy, and our economy has been smashed. I see those two countries being sort of a sacrificial lamb for the continent that they're in. So South Africa being a sacrificial lamb for Africa and Brazil being for South America, where I see America also being a sort of sacrificial lamb for North America and the rest of sort of the Western world. Those two countries, Brazil and South Africa, I would say look up a lot to America and copy so much of the culture there. Now, being from South Africa, I'll speak from a South African perspective. South Africa is a doorway into the rest of Africa. And I see Brazil the same for the rest of South America. And I feel that is done, as a way of, because this works so well in America, controlling sort of the minds through mainstream media. And the same thing was done in South Africa and the same thing done in Brazil, so that they can gain access to the rest of those continents as a way of, gaining access to the rest of sort of the world. And of course, all the resources that they have. It's so rich in resources. Brazil is in natural resources, and so is South Africa. So we've seen power outages that have been happening. Right now, we've been seeing outages in the internet. We've been out of the internet here for, since the 10th of February. We've been seeing, changes in the weather patterns here, weather that has been, that we haven't really seen before. I mean, look, we always have floodings, we have heavy rains, but the type of rains that we had, the beginning of this year and all the floodings that have happened is just really strange. And we've been hearing about potential for an earthquake to hit South Africa, which is really mind-boggling, because for as long as I've lived in South Africa, we haven't had an earthquake, because of where we're situated. And they're spoken about, earthquakes haven't happened in Cape Town, but, happening in the sea. And so I think there's just been so much done just to smash the country in any way, in as many ways as possible, from the economy, from a health perspective, from the disasters that are happening. We've heard about, the possibility of food shortages happening. And they're talking about, certain parts around the city cutting off the water. And look, we've seen the quality of the water go down so much. From what I know, there was a point where South Africa had the third best kind of tap water in the world. And now it's terrible. The water standards in the Vaal Dam by, the South African Human Rights Commission is deemed unacceptable. And to some extent, I believe that has been done deliberately to create a crisis and then, present a solution for the crisis. If there was a water crisis that happened, it would just spark things off in such a short period of time. it's really scary. I'm a person who's usually, very optimistic, but when I look at this year and I look at how far things have gone so far, yeah, we're really heading towards dark time. Now, a lot of small-sized farmers have a difficult time with the whole pandemic, pushed more into sort of the bigger sort of commercial farmers gaining more of a monopoly in agriculture. It would be easier for a food crisis to happen because of that. And yeah, the internet, it's just been problems and troubles with the internet. We had these 5G towers going up since the beginning of the lockdown. The internet this month has just been terrible. I feel part of it is conditioning for something bigger to happen. So many people have lost their jobs because a lot of the industries, the companies, that have been in operation for like over 4 decades, shutting down, a lot of people being retrenched, just going to lead to, again, like a domino effect. More and more people going on to this grant that the government is giving, which is really nothing. I mean, they're giving 350 Rand to people per month, which is, it's not more than like $20, $25. I don't know what they're expecting people to do, We're going to see more and more people, having to apply for these grants because people just not going to have any other choice. I believe that cyclone that came in and the heavy rains that we had the past month are part of, the weather warfare as we've seen in Texas. I feel that the hailstorm is part of it. I feel that it's sort of a step towards more to come. The mask wearing, again, I feel that is really an attack on the human heart, because it's a killing of emotions, it's killing of care. We no longer know and see who we're talking to. Look, I had a conversation with somebody a few days ago, and he was wearing a mask, and during the talk he lowered his mask, and I was like, oh wow, I would have never expected, you look like that. And the feeling that I had changed from, speaking to somebody who had a mask and actually seeing the person's face and his facial expressions, A smile now was a really rare thing, I feel being conditioned to, sort of communicating with machines, where don't have any sort of emotions kind of coming back. And again, ultimately, I see it's an attack on the human heart. I'm starting to find more strength and courage to speak truth. The other day, some lady wanted me to wear a mask while I was outside, and I refused. And I said it was my God-given, right to breathe in God's fresh air, and I'm not going to wear a mask. And I said it in the most respectable way without bashing her.